Welcome to WYSC, where we give you a quick peek at the day's top stories. I'm Julia Manchester, in for Jamal Simmons. Here's some news you might have missed overnight. President Trump is bidding farewell to his hometown, the Big Apple. He's changing his residency to the Sunshine State permanently. He says he doesn't like the way New York politicians are treating him, so he's heading for Florida. On the 2020 campaign trail, candidate Elizabeth Warren released the details of her health care plan, and we'll have more on that coming up. But right now, this is why you should care. Democratic candidate and former Vice President Joe Biden is losing ground in Iowa polling. The latest New York Times Siena College poll shows Biden standing in the Hawkeye State took a nosedive from 3rd to 4th place, where he's polling at 17%. Elizabeth Warren is sitting at the top with a slight lead at 22%, compared with Bernie Sanders at 19% and Pete Buttigieg at 18%. This is surprising, considering Iowans seemed to be in for Biden when he threw his name in the ring last April. Most polls show Biden is still the frontrunner nationally, but he's losing ground in early primary and caucus states, which tend to set the pace. A note about the poll: there's almost a 5% margin of error there. That means that the top 3 candidates in the poll are in a statistical tie. While Biden fights to keep his spot at the top nationally, Warren is delivering the details of her highly anticipated health care plan. We knew she wanted a Medicare for All plan, but no one knew how it would be paid for. According to the plan, it wouldn't increase taxes on the middle class. All Americans would have full long-term health care with a price tag of an additional $20.5 trillion. That's less than the $34 trillion it was previously expected to cost. Writing in a Medium post, Warren defended her plan, saying, quote, "Medicare for All is about the same price as our current path and cheaper over time. That means that the debate isn't really about whether the United States should pay more or less, it's about who should pay." The revenue would come from current health funding from employers and state governments, as well as a tax on the wealthy, corporations, and high-earning investors. This is why you should care. The New York Times Siena College survey that found Biden is falling in Iowa also found that some of the key issues exciting voters include breaking up banks, increasing Social Security benefits, and revamping healthcare to a single-payer system. Voters are paying attention to the candidates, and it seems like some candidates are paying closer attention to what the voters want. There's still time for candidates to gain ground, but they may have to reconsider key points in their platforms. Lackluster test results have educators a little worried. According to the National Assessment of Education Progress, or the nation's report card, reading scores for 8th graders dropped 3 points and reading scores for 4th graders dropped 1 point. Math scores went up 4 points and down slightly for 8th graders. The 2019 NAEP was administered to over 600,000 students enrolled in public and Catholic schools in every state and the District of Columbia. Most notably, there was a difference in the reading scores. 31 states reported that 8th graders' reading scores declined. The scores also dropped at both 8th grade levels for low, middle, and high-performing students. High-performing students in previous years showed improvement. So why should you care? Students are struggling. According to Tanya Matthews, the vice chair of the National Assessment Governing Board, which oversees the NAEP, students that need to make the most academic progress are making no progress at all. On a different note, Black, Hispanic, Native American, and white students in 4th and 8th grade scored lower in reading in 2019 compared to 2017. We know what the scores say, but we still need more research to know why. The House finally held an impeachment vote yesterday, but not the vote that would impeach the president. Rather, a vote on how the process of an impeachment inquiry is going to go down. My fellow colleague at the Hill, Juliegrace Brufke, has been on top of all things impeachment related, and she is with me today. Juliegrace, tell me what happens now.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yesterday, it passed 232-196. 2 Democrats broke the ranks and voted with Republicans on it. It kind of laid the groundwork for future impeachment proceedings, the public hearings that are supposed to be coming up. and kind of codified and directed the 3 committees that have kind of taken charge of the impeachment inquiry so far to continue with their work. Now, Nancy Pelosi has said that the public portion of hearings could be coming as soon as the week after next. We've heard Bill Taylor agree that he's willing to publicly testify, so I think it's really going to accelerate.
Absolutely. So I want to get to those public hearings in a minute, but first, Republicans kind of surprised everyone with all really getting behind Trump and voting against this. Was it that big of a surprise, and what does this mean for the party going forward if the impeachment vote presumably passes the House and goes into the Senate?
Now, I would definitely call it a win for Kevin McCarthy and the whip team, Steve Scalise. There's definitely, I think, some concern that a couple of the moderate members, especially those that are retiring, like Francis Rooney, could have broken with the ranks there, but they ultimately kind of managed to hold it together. Now, their big attacks so far have been on process. When everything's taken public, how that narrative will change, I think will be an interesting thing to watch out for.
Right. So tell us what to watch out for when it comes to these public hearings. I mean, I assume they're going to be televised across the entire country. And how will this play with the optics of the investigation? How are Democrats and Republicans really going to use this in their favor?
So now, Republicans have really kind of been hammering Democrats on the process, saying that it's unfair, that everything has been done behind closed doors, that the Democrats have been cherry picking the information that they've released. So in addition to having these public hearings, Nancy Pelosi said the transcripts of these hearings, which Republicans have been calling for, could be released as soon as next week. Now, depending on what's in those and whether or not any of the information kind of has been skewed, remains to be seen. But I think we'll definitely see both sides kind of leaning in.
Absolutely. And one of those testimonies we're really watching out for is John Bolton, the president's former national security advisor. He's slated to go on November 7th, but his attorney recently said that he's not going to go voluntarily, but he'll have to be subpoenaed. Tell us about that decision process and what Bolton's testimony could mean going forward.
Now, Bolton's testimony could be huge. I mean, right now, so far, Gordon Sondland's kind of the biggest defender of the White House, and a lot of these other depositions have kind of conflicted with what he said. So what John Bolton has to say on all of this could be really critical for Democrats or Republicans. Now, he'll likely be subpoenaed. Whether or not he shows up or is held in contempt also remains to be seen. But that if he does come, it should be kind of the blockbuster testimony.
Yeah. And absolutely. And going forward and how the Senate is going to react to this, House Republicans were very unified, but there's questions as to whether there will be cracks if a vote eventually gets to the Senate. How is the Senate responding to this, and has the White House been able to set out a bit of a public relations strategy for Republicans going forward?
So now Lindsey Graham has met with House Republicans on more than one occasion and has kind of vowed to carry out the entire impeachment process on that side in a very different way that they feel will be more fair on the Republican end. Mitch McConnell, obviously, with procedure, they're going to have to take up impeachment if articles of impeachment are ultimately sent over there. Whether or not Republicans break the ranks, I mean, obviously, on that side, Mitt Romney and Trump don't have a great relationship, but I don't know that they'd have the number of never Trump Republicans to ultimately pass impeachment.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching Hill TV on YouTube. Be sure to click subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we post new videos. And head to thehill.com for all the latest political news.